Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast in which I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop, RPG, and surrounding space. And this week, I'm thrilled to be joined by DeAngelo Murillo. Hello.
Hey, good to see you.
I must admit, I always do this. I always feel bad because I'm always like, "How are you doing?" And then it kind of ignores the fact that we have spoken before pressing the record button.
But, it's all good.
Yeah, but for the people listening who may want to know, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's like this year's been super crazy with different like like a product launch for like Emerald Templars, trying to buy a house in my real life and like managing a bunch of, because I'm a freelance writer, so that means that in order to pay the bills, I need to juggle like 9 things at any given time that give me like a little bit of money each, and then it comes to like, so it's definitely keeping me on my toes, but it's all good though. It's like all good vibes. Yeah.
And I do know, like, again, from like all my friends and stuff, moving house is anything. It's just it's time commitment. It's always going to be that thing of like there's all the prep beforehand, there's all the prep when you move in, and then it's like getting settled. That it's just kind of an unavoidable time tax that you have for like moving places.
Exactly. I never ever thought anything of the words foundation or electrical or air conditioning until you realize they're so crucial to our house, and it's like, dang. So
no, I'm at that case where I'm currently staying is I know I've got like a X number of months before I kind of like move out, but it's that case of where when I moved in versus when I'm going to move out, I've accrued so much more stuff that I came up with like a car and a van. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to fit. Like, I've got a sofa now. That's new. That's not going to fit in like the back of like a tiny car or something like that. But no, you kind of set me up nicely because as fascinated as some people may be about our housing arrangements,
exactly.
You've had like a busy year. So I guess like if you can like summarize what's some of the things you've kind of been up to.
So the main story is that I worked for a very like normal corporate job, and I absolutely hated it. I was not built to be in a cubicle, like a gray soulless cubicle where we have meetings about numbers and all that sort of stuff and everything. But I was so scared to leave my job to pursue my passion of writing and storytelling professionally, because it's always that fear in the back of your mind, in any creative's mind, that it's like, am I even good enough? Like, will I just like be a failure and a joke, and like, the person in the family that everyone else warns their kids, like, you better do good in school, otherwise you'll be like them, that sort of like fear or whatever. But sure enough, COVID hit and major corporations started to cut jobs and losses and all that kind of stuff. And I worked for an auto insurance company, and people weren't driving their cars, so therefore, they didn't need so many adjusters. And when I got fired and let go in October of 2020, I was at a crossroads to jump back into the corporate ring and get back to like a 9-to-5 job, or to finally travel down the road less traveled, and see if I could make it as a freelance writer and a professional dungeon master and all that kind of stuff. And even if it was possible, and I had some savings built up, so I talked to my now wife, but then fiance, and she was extremely supportive of it. And she was like, you know what, go and try to do this. And the long story short is that I ended up getting noticed by does D&D Beyond and Voodoo Warrior Project and a bunch of other different like companies that they brought me on to do this. So that's been that story. And then it's also given me the freedom and time to work on this tabletop RPG that I've always wanted to make, called Emerald Templars, that I've been like working really hard on and everything like that. My super big passion project I'm pouring my heart and soul into. So this year is actually the year that all these big things are happening, where it's finally like showtime. There's it's like that scene in like any sort of like sports movie where they train and train and train and train, and then they get in the ring and then they see if they can measure up to the big challenge or conflict. So it's been a wild ride. I wouldn't change anything. It is definitely stressful and anxiety ridden, but it still feels good. It feels like my soul is actually doing what it's meant to do. So
I mean, it's incredible. Like, it's awesome kind of hear about like those like the trepidation of like those leaps of faith to be like, this is something that I want to do, and you just have to try. But I'm going to almost like tackle the topics almost in like reverse order, and kind of starting with like Emerald Templars then. So you kind of said this has been something you kind of been like almost like a passion project. Is this like an idea that you've kind of been like has it been like 5 years like that you've kind of been sitting on the back burner, or is it now that once you had that, like once you were let off, you're like off the leash to kind of go and kind of chase your dreams, that you're like, no, finally I can kind of put something together?
Yeah, so it's like Emerald Templars is many things, but there's main like two prongs that are part of it. One of which is like the fantasy side, where it's the Emerald Templars in a nutshell are essentially like magic police, where they're in a world where everyone has access to magic, and some people abuse that and have abused that and been tyrants towards their people and subjects and everything. So concerned citizens banded together and created the Emerald Templars to regulate the use of magic and make sure nothing's going weird, because it can easily, open portals to different realms, or like raise the dead, or mess with the elements and all this sort of weird stuff. So they go and make sure everything's okay.
Yeah.
And yeah. So and that's heavily inspired by things like the Grey Wardens from Dragon Age, who help to fight the Darkspawn. They're a neutral faction. They do what they need to protect the realm, even if it means working for or against certain factions. And then, of course, the Witchers from Witcher, where they also are monster hunters and everything like that. And then same with the Night Watch, where they go and they protect the realm from the big overarching threat. Even if no one believes that it's actually real, they still are there and have a force and, do their duties and everything. So I've always loved that neutral faction that really sacrifices everything to protect everyone, despite their squabbling over little tiny, problems.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I was like, I want to see more of that. Like, that's what I really love are these people who are like martyrs essentially, and wanting to like check that out. So that's,
I was going to say, one thing I really like about it, because it kind of argues that big point of like, once you get into like almost like high magic fantasy settings, there is a case of like, there's, I don't know, like time magic, like all it takes is like one person, and the kind of devastation they could wreak is
exactly.
And to have like someone who's like, no, we collectively we just all agree that like this magic should be kind of like regulated. And what I also love is because it also kind of ties in the second fact of like, sometimes with tabletop RPGs, sometimes it can be hard to kind of like group and motivate the players in like a single point of like, we're all monster hunters, we're all or like investigators and stuff like that. And I like the kind of the general seat of the Emerald Templars. Like, no, we're just all we keep things, we allow the world to continue.
Yeah,
like, there's no one kind of out there,
and especially in the and I'm so sorry, I'm probably like jumping ahead to like
for the question.
Because the cool thing about it is that the players ideally, now that obviously they can take the game and go in anywhere of the history that they want to play in, but where I, the creator, am intending them to play in is the modern day, where the big wars where they took over the tyrants and fought against them are over, and now it's peace and prosperity, where people literally join the Emerald Templars to like help pay off their student loan debt, or to get more renown, to like become a politician, or if they committed a crime and don't want to serve time or get exiled or executed, they can join the Emerald Templars and serve their sentence. And it's so peaceful now that the Emerald Templars are kind of like a joke, sort of, where they're an honorary position that they aren't required to do anything major. But when the players actually pick up the game, the intent is that weird things happen under their watch, and they have to be the ones to deal with it, sort of thing. So so it's a situation where like it's like, we just wander the land helping people with little things, and then we take our money or like leave and all that. But now not anymore. Now they actually have to rise up to the occasion. So because finding plot hooks, like good, convincible plot hooks as to why a group of people are together and stay together after the conflict is done, is one of the hardest parts. And this way it's an easy access to be like, all right, you guys cleared out that necromancer. Now here is a chronomancer that's gone wild over in this section, and then like. And
I also like how, like, obviously in the kind of the lore of the faction, you kind of have that justification for like, people with like a criminal sentence, people like just paying off their that you can have like a wealth of different characters from different backgrounds kind of coming in and being involved in the party. Just because, again, I feel bad because I cut you off early. So that's one prong of what kind of want to practice is obviously this neutral faction kind of keeping everything, the world from ending. Like what's the kind of the second prong that kind of inspired the creation?
So the second prong is that I am Latino, I am Mexican American, and I've been a fan of fantasy for such a long time. But every time when I was little, I would look up at X-Men, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and all these different massive pillars of geekdom, and you would see mostly pale faces and not much representation. If there was representation, there'd be like one dude, like Lando Calrissian, or there'd be like, or it'd be filled with a white woman or whatever. It'd be like, this is our representation, sort of thing. So it was really disheartening when I was little, and it really did have a massive impact on my self-esteem to be like, dang, I am brown, so therefore I will never arise to be there. All I can hope to be is a criminal or a comic relief. And then meanwhile, these dudes over here who are going to be the ones to rise up, because that's what all the heroes look like. And it's taken a lot of years and literal therapy to get over that fact and to be like, wait a second, I've been brainwashed by Western media to believe that's what heroes look like, but that's not the case. Like, anyone with good intentions and hard work and dedication can rise to become this sort of thing. We just are not seeing it. And I waited and waited and waited like my whole life essentially to find a piece of media that fulfilled the fantasy of seeing like darker skin tones and like different cultural influences into like different stuff that's done like properly and in good taste, rather than being like misrepresented or underrepresented. Like the classic example that always got under my skin was of the Yanti in Dungeons and Dragons, where they have these Mesoamerican sort of like pyramids and statues, and they're savages. Now, I think that it's changed now, but they used to be like lawful evil. They were only meant to kill you and do ritual sacrifice, and like, they had an evil god that was very like savage and all that kind of stuff. And you look at that and it's like, dude, like that's my history, that's my ancestors. Like, can you please like at least make, because the best way to handle things is that every creature ideally has their own chance of being morally good, neutral, or evil, sort of thing.
I think that it's the thing where, like, obviously the particularly D&D in particular, you look back and stuff like that, and so many, like, you can see where they've taken inspiration from other cultures, but it is more of kind of like so reductive.
It's like bastardization, sort of.
But you can see how, like, with D&D in particular, obviously they are trying to like go that direction of like, was it with like when it comes to like alignment, they include things like
they're trying to
But no, I was gonna say I'm 100% with you. I'm always in the case of like individuals should have alignment, creatures just like take a goat for example. All goats aren't lawful evil or anything. They're just goats. You may have some really evil goats like who at any point they will headbutt you. In the same way you might have like some super, cute cuddly ones.
Yeah, especially when you look at some creatures who have a decent amount of wisdom and intelligence, you would assume that they would be able to have self-awareness and be able to reflect on the decisions they made and be like, wait, are we really wanting to do this? Like, do I feel good about, like it just makes sense that people would, do that way. So after waiting so many years and not seeing that piece of media that I've always wanted to be a part of, play, embrace, and all that kind of stuff, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. So let's go ahead and, create a fantasy realm that brings in these different cultural influences. And not only that, but have writers of those backgrounds be able to come in and gush about what they love about their cultures, and to really bring in that awesome stuff that we're just not used to seeing, because history is always written by the victor. So there's a lot of history that's not told, for one reason or another to us. So it'd be beautiful to be able to, especially for like veteran tabletop RPG players, who have seen various fantasy media come and go, and like a lot of what we've seen is very European centric, like stuff. So it'd be nice to see something different. And I love dragons and like medieval knights and all that kind of stuff and everything like that. That's my jam. But it'd be also nice to see more South Asian influence and to see more Polynesian and Mesoamerican and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was the other prong of it, is that way when you pick up a copy of Emerald Templars, it's going to be refreshing and it's going to be a new perspective that you never even had a chance to see before. And it's not like shoved down your throat. It's kind of like, this is what it is. And it's like, oh, cool. All right. That's awesome. And it's just it's good. And the second thing is that when another geek later on down the line from another generation is young and bright-eyed and picks up Emerald Templars, by the time they get to page 50, they have seen themselves in some way or shape or form represented, and that's something that I and a lot of other people have never been able to do. So yeah, those are the two prongs essentially of Emerald Templars. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, it's also because again, it's both kind of aspects are like the kind of it's equal parts, isn't it? It's kind of like the awesome kind of lore and story that kind of it can entice people into a kind of particular product, but then there's also the kind of like behind what's going on kind of behind the scenes and the justification for I think it's incredible. I think it's kind of the amount. It's so often you hear those stories about people I feel underrepresented in media and stuff like that. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's that case where I have to do it. Literally, if I have to do it,
because a lot of times when someone, for example, this is something that happened recently, probably like a month and a half ago or whatever. But a lot of people in the Warhammer community were up in arms about them having more representation on their book covers and different pieces of media and all that kind of stuff. And they were saying like, you're changing our game for the worse and blah, blah, blah. And I was, sitting there being like, no, I think this is a great step because I love Warhammer, and people would also love Warhammer if they, saw more inclusion, even more female characters would be like a great, first step and all that kind of stuff. And then people, their response was like, well, this is their piece of media and they can do whatever they want with it. If you want more representation, then you make your own thing. And I'm like, that's a good point. And then so this is
maybe I will. But no, so in kind of the topic of bringing on a whole crew of people from kind of a bunch of how many people have you got kind of working on Emerald Templars?
Yeah, right now it's about 12 writers, 3 for each in-game nation. And there's four nations currently. And they essentially are all taking a city-state and making it for that nation. So even when you look at one of the nations that's inspired by South Asia or the Middle East or Mesoamerica and all that kind of stuff, they are able to bring in their own distinct flavor from what they love about their culture into that city state. That way, when the game master, and of course they don't even have to use it if they don't want to, but if the game master opens a book and where are we going to start our adventure at? Let's go ahead and go here. It's all right, what's their culture like? What are some laws that they, kind of abide by? What's the population more heavily, at? Are they for magic? Are they for the Emerald Templars more, X, Y, and Z? And that way they get their creative freedom to do whatever they like to. So if they want to bring in their culture from a historical point of they're able to do so, or if they want to change history a little bit to be you know what, my history has been very masculine based, like machismo, so therefore I'm going to make it more equality, or even flip the script and make it more matriarchal. That way there's more women in power and everything. That way they can live their fantasy and do whatever they'd like to, an opportunity that rarely does any writer get to do. And then they also get to inspire hey, by the way, these are the things that I think would be good, like the monsters in the region from folklore, from my culture and all that kind of stuff, and weapons and all that kind of stuff. That way they have a good a strong voice in the influence of it. That way, ideally, same thing for them. When someone a small kid has Saudi Arabian nationality or heritage picks up the book and they see it's written by a fellow Saudi Arabian, they'll be able to see that it's a proper representation and it looks great, and they can feel more connected to it.
I love the fact that you kind of have almost two writers per kind of nation, because it's that kind of almost combination of two individuals' lived experiences, kind of giving a slightly broader representation than just one person's kind of perspective. And that's good. That's kind of nice to kind of have that kind of collaboration kind of feed through everything, really.
Exactly. And they get to communicate to one another about what they have in mind. That way they can bounce off of each other, and be able to have a stronger voice. That way, if there's any time where I am I'm going to introduce this concept, and if anyone feels uncomfortable, there's more voices to be well, hold on here, and then we can all checks and balances each other. And so far it's going beautifully. Everyone's super excited for the project. They're really hyped about it, and so it's wonderful.
So I have to ask them. So obviously, we've got the kind of the justification for how this project formed, the kind of lore about it. on like a mechanical front, what's good the kind of like system that like drives like Emerald Templar?
Yeah, so it's one that I created myself, and like the story behind that was that I originally I never intended to get into game design. I wanted to create my own tabletop RPG by like bringing in the world and then putting it over a like another system and everything, but I couldn't quite find a system that could like encompass all of the ideas that I actually wanted to have for this project. There was one that came close, but unfortunately it just didn't work out. So I was faced with the decision of either completely stopping this project or making my own. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it myself. And then so like I watched a lot of YouTube videos on game design. I played a lot of tabletop RPGs in my past, and I like whipped out all the books, and I like looked at the rules that I liked and the ones I didn't like, and why did I like them, like looking at every game with a more critical eye. And yeah, that's kind of like the way I developed the system that I have now, which is using a percentile die of just like a D10, you know, that represents the double digits. And then you look at your character sheet and add bonuses from like two of your like main aspects of your character sheet, whether it be, you know, your main attributes or your skills or your trade skills and all that. And then you combine it together and then see if you succeed or not. And then there's a whole range of other like modifiers and things you can do with it. Some of the aspects that the playtesters have actually said they love the most is actually the health system, which is based on stress meters. So for the stress meters, your character will have physical stress, anxiety, anger, sanity, and exhaustion. And when you get to 50% of those, you get perks and hindrances, and they differ between which stress you're getting. So if you're extremely anxious, your flights, you know, your agility is ramped up. That way you're like, you know, it's a do or die situation. You're choosing to like run for your life essentially. And if it's, you know, if you're physical danger, you get an increase in your fight skill, which allows you, because you're fighting for your life and trying to survive, you know. And
I like the kind of like almost like inbuilt risk reward, like the idea of like I even though like you know, physically I'm at like a high stress level and stuff like that, there is something to kind of mitigate, and kind of like there's a payoff for that.
Exactly. And then and then same with sanity. Like the higher you go up with sanity and get to that 50% mark, the stronger your spells and prayers are, depending on if you're religious or like a spellcaster. So if you want to be super risky and like risk it for the biscuit essentially, then you can do that. But if there's a cost, because if you get 100%, then you incur trauma, and you're going to need serious help in order to get rid of that. They found it's really fun because it helps to build like organic like role play situations. So if their anger is like growing, then they get to a point where they start to act and role play more aggressively, and everyone can see it, you know. And then every time you try to do something, whether cast a spell or like sprint or try to swing your sword to hit something, you incur like exhaustion as well, to the point, because like the thing that always ran in my mind when I was a dungeon master from like 2008 till now is that there are these people who go into the depths of the earth fighting horrible abominations, you know, and seeing their friends get like maimed and mutilated in all sorts of ways. And yet, at the same time, they come out of that unscathed, and they're like, "Well, I just took a little bit of damage. And that's it. Let's go on and you know, fight something else."
That kind of like stone face is like, "Oh, you know, another day at the office, you know." Right?
Exactly, yeah. And what always fascinates me about everything is like, you know, the psychological aspect and the mental health aspect, and being like, "Oh my god, like I need to like stop, and otherwise I'm going to have a breakdown." And having people in the game be able to help out and to be like, you know, oh, well, my trade skill is actually a therapist, so I'm able to, during the campfire, actually talk with you, you know, about this and try to help your sanity, you know, lower a bit. And because I'm a therapist, my sanity is a little bit higher than everyone else's. And as a fighter, you have like tons of physical health and tons of exhaustion, and like, but your sanity is lower, so it's kind of like harder for you to handle this like stuff. So it's like it helps like checks and balances for everyone to help out, even if they're a musician or even a cook, you know, as their trade skill. It's still they can cook a good meal, and it's like soul food where it calms everyone down, you know, and like is able to help out. So it adds more, in my opinion, at least, and from the playtesters, like their feedback has been very positive, where they feel it's like a more organic experience where your character isn't just like a buff boy, like murder hobo. It's actually a person, you know, with their like wants and desires and like limits and everything. And then
I know. I think your approach of like obviously designing like a new system from scratch is I think sometimes it is like the best approach, because there are always going to be there's definitely one or two systems out there where it feels like the RP and the systems are almost at like two opposite ends. And by kind of like by even sometimes in the case of like games that have adopted other systems, there is always going to be not necessarily to use a buzzword, the ludonarrative harmony, you know, when the game's like story, the mechanics all kind of feed into it together. And it sounds like, well, you know, Emerald Templars, the kind of stress systems and the way you kind of handle and with skills and stuff like that, it all kind of builds in. It naturally allows the player to kind of ease into these role-playing sessions, and that's kind of what you want. You want the systems of the game to encourage the role play and kind of vice versa, you know, for someone to kind of go like two characters going through that kind of like therapy session around like a campfire to have like a, you know, a mechanical difference of like, okay, I have now kind of, you know, come to terms with what happened.
Yeah, and that leads one of the beautiful like from one of the playtests. It was a really, really hard session where their roles were just not with them, and they ended up getting a lot of exhaustion, a lot of like anxiety, and a lot of everything. Even though they achieved victory, their characters were taxed, like, you know. So one of the guys was like, hey, you know, is there a chance I can retire my character, and being like, you know, and I was like, oh my god, that's a beautiful like idea, where because every Emerald Templar is there for one reason or another. Like they can be a volunteer where they want to be there, but a majority of them are there for an ulterior motives, which is fine. But after accomplishing the big bad and like, you know, saving the realm, they can be like, you know what, I'm gonna go and start a bakery, or I'm gonna go and like, you know, start a family, or like, you know. And that's beautiful, because like I feel like in a lot of different tabletop RPGs, when you have your character, they just go and go and go and go without stopping, you know. And a lot of times there's no like real strong organic reason as to why they would do that. So like I know there's a lot of characters that I have that I would have loved for them to have closure and be like, you know what, they've always wanted to you know, start their own, you know, whatever orphanage or whatever. So therefore they're going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to introduce a new character with a whole new, you know, storyline and all that kind of stuff. That way we can see his adventure, their distinct experiences, and so it's cool.
So I was gonna say, so would you say that like kind of the design of Emerald Templar is more kind of like contained mini arcs versus kind of like long sprawling kind of campaigns, or is it somewhere in the middle again?
Yeah, it's really, I think the mini arcs is a good like place where I kind of have the idea as a game designer, because I feel like in real life we only really have a couple like really strong major adventures, then we have like little slice of life stuff afterwards, you know. And you know, this is kind of like represents that, where for this one chapter in their lives they fought with all their heart and soul, and they made it, and then they all go their separate ways, you know, for better, for worse, or whatever. But yeah, I also like it for long form campaigns, you know, if there's a big evil that like cannot be killed or whatever, and they have to like go and, you know, fight it. But I think, the slice of life sort of thing is a good, like, what I'm trying to capture with this game. That way players can get together, tell a great story, have fun, get to really know their characters and see them grow, and then walk away and embark on a new adventure if they'd like to.
No, awesome. And then, well, I guess like kind of like rounding off the chat about like Emerald Templars, then is like, do you have like an ideal like date that you're trying to plan to release by, or is it still kind of like it's ready when it's ready? I'm like
Oh no, so on April 15th of this year, it'll be launching on Kickstarter. We're trying to raise $10,000 to be able to get like, you know, hardcover books, make sure all the writers have money to be able to put their heart and soul into it. Same with the artwork as well, and editors and graphic designers and all that kind of stuff. Like it's been an endeavor, definitely getting into like the game design aspect, because it's one thing to make a game that people consider to be fun, but it's a whole other thing to have a group of like a team and be able to make sure everyone's properly paid and everything looks good, and then having someone come in to make sure we don't look like jerks for whatever reason, whether it be poor grammar or punctuation or like even layout design.
No, I mean editors, they're always worth their weight in gold.
Exactly. Yeah. So so we're really excited. I feel like there's a lot of value in Emerald Templars, and like if people really do like back the project, they're going to have a good product at the end of the day that they'll hopefully be able to get a lot of enjoyment out of. Yeah.
No, also, I mean, again, it sounds like an awesome kind of project, and so much of it kind of comes through in just the way you kind of chat about it. You can see that you're passionate about the project. But mentioning kind of playtesting previously, and with some of the other stuff you do in terms of like being like a professional DM, you've run like live streamed like playtests essentially of Emerald Templar and stuff like that. I'm curious about how you went about prepping for like a stream or like that aspect of things, especially with a system that you know and created so kind of like intimately.
Yeah, it's been an experience for sure. So like I said previously, I had an idea coming into this whole project. Like Emerald Templars has always been in the back of my mind for a long time, and it's been in my homebrew D&D sessions, but now that it's becoming like an actual product that I mean to have for the community to be able to check out and purchase and play with their friends and all that, I just wanted to create the world and lay it over an already made up system. So I did a lot of playtests thinking that's how I was going to go, and people were like, yeah, this is fun, this is great, I like it. And I was like, oh, good, awesome. And then sure enough, I got the hard news that like it just didn't work out for like due to mostly like commercial reasons, like, hey, we understand you want to use our game, we're not ready for that yet, so therefore you're gonna have to wait, or you're gonna have to like not use our system. And it's like, oh dang, okay, I understand that, I respect that, I'm sorry. Because I didn't know about like open game license or anything like that getting into this, so that was a mess up on my part. So like I had about maybe 5 play tests with that previous system that everyone said was great, and then I jumped over immediately after like gutting that system and making up my own like in a very crude way. Only had about 72 hours to work on it, and I had it with my first like playtest group in front of a live audience and everything. And like the lore and world building held up. They were all fascinated by that, and that's I think what carried us. But the mechanics were so confusing, so convoluted, and so contradictory that I was like, all right, guys, what's your feedback? And everyone had like a huge speech, like a TED talk about all the things wrong about it. And I was like, all right. And then like,
I mean, again, within the space of like 72 hours, I feel like you got to give yourself like,
I should have like looking back, I should have canceled it and been like, because everything that came out of their mouth, I already knew already. Like I knew it was really bad, but I just didn't like want to cancel. And then but at the same time, I probably should have to wait, because like especially for those players, like they walked away from the table being like, oh, Emerald Templars is like not very good, and it's like, no. So like thankfully after that session, I like licked my wounds, went over and like really worked hard on the game and like figured out, I like looked at all these different systems and like what I really liked about it, for like Vampire the Masquerade and their hunger system, and like how they become more aggressive or lose control the more like they use their powers and all that kind of stuff, and then for like Dungeons and Dragons with their like skill checks and all that kind of stuff, and Call of Cthulhu with their sanity trackers and like all these different things, and seeing like what I liked about it. Like I like this concept, but it's like way too convoluted. It requires the player to do way too many things. So how do we reduce that and make it easier, for like, I want this game to be easy enough that new players can come in and immediately learn how to do it, and the depth that like veteran players can still find ways to tinker with things and make cool outcomes,
I think that's something that like I guess just game designers as a whole sometimes always there is always sometimes that desire to put more in, and to kind of like oh I'm going to make a system that's so kind of like so kind of complex and stuff like that, because And sometimes it is that case, it's that balance of like, even if you as a designer are very kind of like mechanically minded, where you kind of all that enjoy that stuff, sometimes you get lost in the source in the nicest sense of the term and stuff like that. And yeah, the idea of having a core like simple, like again the system you kind of described for like Emerald, it's 2 dice. I mean, you can't, it's what two d10s, I guess is. Yeah, no, I can definitely kind of see the journey you kind of took with kind of putting it together.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, so from that kind of like deep dive into like so many different like RPGs and stuff like that, how long or how many kind of iterations did you kind of work through?
A lot. I think this would be like the maybe the third or the fourth iteration, because like there'll be that moment, whether it be in the shower, or on the toilet, which are the two like main like brain generation sessions or whatever, where like you'll think of a really awesome concept that answers all of your problems, but it requires you to gut your system and to implement a new structure for like everything.
Yeah.
And you're like, God, and then you got to play it with playtesters, because the beautiful thing about playtesters and even people is that like they absolutely know if there's a problem with your system, like 100% absolutely, no question about it. They might not know how to fix it or like or whatever else, but they're good for those red flags. So if like people were like, if you introduce a concept and no one's using it, then they're not seeing the value in it, or it's too convoluted, or like, or if they keep asking questions about the same thing, it's like, that's not clearly not explained well enough. So like that needs to get worked on. So it's been a lot of trial and error. But thankfully now it's at a point where it feels strong. Like all the playtests that I'm having now, they're like, okay, I get this. Cool. Yeah, let's use this, and they get really excited about it. And it's funny because like when they first start an Emerald Templar session, they get really cocky and they're like, oh, we have a lot. Like I have like, 70 exhaustion limit. So I'm never going to run out of that. And then they start to roll the dice, and then they get towards like the 70% mark of the session. And they're like, oh my God, I'm almost tapped out for this stuff. Like I really got to watch what my character does now. And like really do like, should I attack this creature or should I find another solution? Because I am like really exhausted, and it's fun to see that as a game designer, to be like, it's working as intended. Like that's what I intended, for you to be pressured to really weigh your options, whether it be you start the session off being extremely careful and cautious, so you save your reserves, and then at the end of the fight or at the end of the session, you really go ham and you have that extra space. Or if you really like go hard on every single encounter, but then at the end of the session, you barely have anything to use unless you really want to push your character to the limit. So it's like fun to see them have to really think about that. And like, I don't know if I'm like a sadist or whatever, where I like to see people stress out and like, try to really carefully decide. Because my favorite part is watching groups of players like stop everything and be like, hold on, guys, let's talk about how we're going to address the situation. And they really get immersed into it. And it means the world to them about like how they're going to proceed next. And I'm like, oh yes, because I feel like that's what every dungeon master wants from their table, is that buy-in, that immersion, where like they actually genuinely care about what's going on, instead of just being like, I just whatever, I'm gonna use Firebolt again. I mean,
the moments where it almost feels like the weird fact, but like when you as a game master, you can sit back and do nothing and just let the players kind of. It's weird that like the moments when you're not doing anything are the best.
Exactly.
There's those moments where the players are like, they're so kind of immersed and kind of committed. So would you say that that's like a design feature of like Emerald Templars that you're kind of like proudest of? Is that kind of like interplay of stress, or is there like another kind of design aspect that you're particularly kind of proud of and how it's kind of come out in playtesting?
Yeah, so the games that I enjoy playing the most are like Darkest Dungeon, Dark Souls, and which is very telling of like the theme of the game. But like and different games where you can't just rush in and do whatever you want to without getting punished heavily for it. Like you can do it, that's fine, but you're gonna get smacked up, and all that.
So there's always like an underlying of like almost like realism and kind of like a dark or gritty tone to things.
Yeah, exactly. Where like you might have a character, like even your armor, and thankfully this I wanted a more convoluted system for it, but now as a more experienced game designer, I absolutely don't, and I'm happy with how it is.
Yeah.
But even your armor is subject to being cracked and broken, so you really have to take care of like, should we kill everything that we see, or is there an alternate solution to this? And ideally, in the game masters will have alternate options for how to deal with an encounter. Like, ideally, if you're dealing with a creature that has a certain intelligence, diplomacy could be an option. Or like, are there traps in the room, or that you can utilize? Or is there some sort of way you can manage it without killing something? Or and if it does have to come to killing something, that's fine, you have the ability to do so. But it's going to cost you, and it could be nothing or could be a lot, depending on how the dice roll for you. So so I really enjoy that like measured action and caution, because in my opinion it makes you care more about the situation in the game. Like, you're all hands on deck to handle the situation that's in front of you, rather than just being willy-nilly and being like, whatever.
Yeah,
so that's what I love, at least.
The situations where obviously the management of resources in whichever kind of shape or form is more tense than the fact that like any moment it's like I think it literally goes back to that concept of risk. Is that those moments where, like, even if you are playing it like as safely as can be and stuff like that, there's still risks to take. And again, you can't just sit at the back and just let everyone else do things. There's going to be points where you're going to need to wade into the middle of things. No, that's awesome. And best of luck for the Kickstarter next month and stuff like that. I imagine.
Yeah, thank you.
I imagine like in that last again in this month kind of build up and stuff like that. I imagine it's like feeling a little tense. I don't know what like.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because I've never ran a Kickstarter before or anything, so I'm like researching, watching a lot of videos, connecting with a lot of different people who have already gone through the experience, to understand like what are the pitfalls and what are the things that they really got right, so I can help navigate my own community through that. Because I never ever want someone to like trust in me, trust in my product, and then for me to completely let them down in a major way. Even the people that work with me, I never ever want them to have that experience. I only want them to come in to understand the agreement of like, if you give us $40 for a physical copy, you're going to get good quality content with beautiful artwork and all that kind of stuff. Or like, if you come to work with me, I'm going to ask you to write 2,500 words, and in exchange, you're going to get X amount of money. And like, and we have a good agreement, let's go forward. That way, no one feels slighted in any way. Because I've been a part of situations, both as a writer and as a backer for a Kickstarter, where I felt completely taken advantage of and taken for granted, and then my money's gone, or like, I never saw money from a hard work and dedication that I put into something. So and I don't like that way that feels. So I never want Emerald Templars to be associated any way, shape, or form with it. Like, granted, if someone picks it up, looks through the book, and it's like, this is a solid system and this is a solid world building, but it's just not for me, then it's like, that's okay, no worries, but I still like delivered on my end.
100%. I think like all it takes is having like once you go through that experience once, it's that case of like, now I know what to do. It's like you don't want that kind of same experience to kind of impact anyone else. I'm curious though. So was it talking about like, I guess some of your writing kind of more broadly and stuff like that? Was it you run like essentially like a news website? Was it in the geek life as well?
Yeah. So I've always been very passionate about trying to bring positive change to whatever community I'm in. So in 2012, I started my website called The Geek Life. That is thegeeklyfe.com. And the reason being was that I had horrible anxiety when I was like younger. Like, and at this time I was like, I think 21 years old. And some people told me about like our local comic book convention called Phoenix Comic Con, and they're like, yeah, it's really great. They have a lot of geeky stuff. They have a lot of cosplayers and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And there was one cosplayer that I was a huge fan of, and I was like, man, I really just want to like meet her and like take a selfie with her and just tell her how awesome she is. Because there was a cosplayer who was really, really talented and inspiring and like super cool and everything. So I gathered up my courage, spent a lot of money, made my own costume, and like headed down there. I was actually an Imperial Guardsman from Warhammer 40K.
Nice.
Like just like barely anyone knew who I was, but like so I got dressed, like drove through horrible traffic to get there, parked, got to the convention, overwhelmed with the amount of people that were there. and like found that same cosplayer and had a horrible experience with it. Did not go anywhere near I thought like it was going to go, unfortunately. And I was so downtrodden and heartbroken that I was like, oh, that sucks. I'm such an idiot. Like why did I think that it was going to go like, any other way than horrible, X, Y, and Z. But then sure enough, I wandered into another booth of a cosplayer who was not known at all. And she treated me with such kindness and respect and was super cool with me and cheered me up. Like at first it was like, oh yeah, here are my wares. Feel free to buy them if you like to. And she's like, whoa, I see that you're sad. Like, are you okay? And she sat with me and talked to me for about 40 minutes. And it completely changed my perspective, where I was like, why was I so focused on this big name, cosplayer that didn't give even me the time of day and actually like blatantly disrespected me, when this cosplayer over here no one knows about and was so kind to a stranger? That's someone who should be celebrated. So what I did was I like started the Geek Life and I like wrote an article about like, my experience and how awesome like this person was, not focusing on the negativity, but focusing on the positivity of being like, this person treated me with such kindness and respect. Like, I think everyone should follow them because they're so wonderful. Yeah. And then as I went on, getting into the sort of cosplay community and convention community, I started to find various artists and writers and cosplayers and all these different people who were putting their heart and soul like on their sleeves and everything, wearing it on their sleeves, and no one knew about them at all. They were just so focused on the top tier big name people. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to interview all of these people and spread about how wonderful they are and amazing they are, and then keep going like that. So sure enough, from like 2012 to about 2019, I did that, and it along the way, which was like always my experience, along the way of trying to spread positivity, opportunities spawned where like bigger companies were like, we love your message and what you're doing, that we want to work with you in some way and let's collaborate. And so like Crunchyroll and like Verve and like various car companies, surprisingly, and like all these different.
Yeah, they just love the positivity. It's hard to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which was, you never think about it, because like you don't think like cosplay and comic book conventions and then car companies, but they're like, listen, you drive 6 hours from Arizona to California to attend this convention. Why don't you take one of our new cars and tweet about it and like blog about it? And then like, wow. And it's like, I guess so, so like, it was really, really cool. And it was all become from this mission of positivity and inclusion and representation, that I really like strive to just be that positive voice. Like, if no one else wants to feature you, I will do so because you're worthy and you're valid, so unfortunately what happened is that in 2019, that's when like COVID like started and all the conventions shut down. So my main source of content for the website like also shut down, and I was like, oh god, like I can keep writing about anime reviews and all that kind of stuff, but it's just not the same content because the content was people like celebrating people. So that's when I kind of shifted gears to tabletop RPGs, but it still came in handy because like D&D Beyond, for example, we're like, hey, we saw you write articles and be super positive and have an awesome voice. Like, why don't you come over here and talk about that with, D&D stuff? And I was like, okay. And then just like, started doing that. So
it's awesome kind of hearing about your kind of journey and particularly like to hear it, like it like a message of positivity, it being so kind of like rewarding in that kind of sense of like the opportunities. And I guess in a weird way, obviously like Comic-Con conventions and the tabletop, they're within the same bubble. Like,
they are, there were these huge gaming rooms filled with tables with like all these board games and tabletop RPGs that were coming out, that I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm not gonna spend my time here, but that's cool. And then now I'm like, when Emerald Templars comes out, I'm gonna be in that same area buying a booth and like, selling, copies of Emerald Templars. So it's like weird how it all feeds into each other. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask you, so about your experience with obviously writing some of the articles for like D&D Beyond and stuff like that. What were like some of the inspirations behind some of those articles? Because I think, didn't you write one about, was it vampires?
It was I write them about like very silly things. I always try to think of like outside the box, like because we're so used to the normal stuff that there needs to be something new. Otherwise it's all screaming into the void. So some of them articles that I wrote were like Strixhaven had just come out or was going to come out for D&D, which Strixhaven is their magical school, kind of like their Hogwarts Harry Potter like style thing, with different houses and all these different schools of magic and everything. So I was like, what like I would love is is like 5 young adult like novel inspired tropes that you could put in your actual Strixhaven stuff, you know, because there's all these YA novels that come out with all these silly tropes of like, you know, the harem where like everyone's in love with this one character, or the love triangle where you have the two, like the bad boy and the good boy fighting over, you know, the main character, depending. So it's like all these silly things and people find enjoyment out of it, where it's like, oh, that's funny, I would love to, you know, put that in my session. And then
it feels like, you know, the like classical wizard school drama, you know, but just amped up where everyone is now casting spells in between, you know, all this kind of
exactly, yeah. And then other ones are bringing like pulling from my own heritage, which is like Mexican folklore, which is Day of the Dead, which is a holiday that celebrates those who have passed away, being like on this specific, you know, day, you can go to the grave of someone who you loved and who passed away, and bring them their favorite food and bring them their favorite drink and all that kind of stuff, and their spirit will visit you and spend time with you. And that's such a beautiful concept, and that's something rare that we see about, you know, the spirit world and the undead, you know. So I like wrote an article about ways to handle like necromancy, or like, you know, these different things, and so that way it's not a nefarious, evil, malicious way, but more of a like, yeah, you know, let's go ahead and have a festival where everyone for this time, the spirits willingly come back to be able to visit everyone, and they don't attack anyone, there's no issues, and like, you know, all that kind of stuff. That way it helps, you know, bring more spice into different D&D sessions, or homebrew sessions.
Yeah, the idea of like, you can kind of have those kind of like show the range of like possible experiences, as well as kind of also like bending those tropes. And so again, a good amount of what I kind of like about like, you know, just like tabletop RPG is that dance you have with like tropes. And you know, you can kind of lean in, like sometimes it's fun to lean into them and kind of go with the right, but just as much time as like sometimes it's the right opportunity to like identify a trope and intentionally kind of like turn it on its head. And you know, and give people, like, everyone expects a graveyard to be, you know, like oh, it's misty, it's spooky and stuff like that. But no, to actually, you know, to take inspiration from, you know, your heritage and make it a you know, a cause for celebration. It gives something new that, you know, maybe people at the table hadn't quite experienced.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of our sessions are, especially for new dungeon masters, they're like, there's a big bad guy and you have to beat him up, go. And but for veteran players, we're so used to that it's like, all right, what else can we make up that's different and feels like more original and all that. And then that's what I try to help out with, was to bring more ideas to be able to help make it a more unique session. And no,
awesome. Well, okay, fair. So I want to try a bit of an exercise. Looking at the time, we've got about, what is it, like 10 minutes left in our kind of chat.
Sure.
And speaking about, you know, taking encounters and kind of throwing them on our head, I did this last week again. So last week I had an episode all by myself because it was it sounds weird, but I like to have like one episode every year in the podcast where I just kind of like give like a news update.
Sure.
So this is for 4 level 2 D&D characters. We're gonna hit the random fight on Kobold Fight Club, and I'll let you know what creatures we get, and we just need to come up with some sort of encounter. It doesn't need to be combat focused. It's just let's see what we dealt and how we can kind of deal with it. Are you ready?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I'm not ready. Wow. Okay. It's just given us a rhinoceros.
Oh, rhinoceros! That's amazing.
All
right,
no, please go ahead.
And the theme is like, is it kobold focused, where there's
so it could be, so you a group of 4 you know, level 2 characters come across a rhinoceros. How, why, and what do they need to do?
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, so I think in this situation it would be where there is maybe like a noble that they really, really have to impress, in order to get information or an asset that, you know, they to go further in their journey.
Yeah.
But this noble is extremely hard to connect with or get with because they're extremely busy. But they do like the finer things in life and have a weakness for sporting events.
Okay.
Specifically for matadors, as they like try to like it's, but instead of actual bulls in the situation, it's a rhinoceros, and the characters actually have to try their best to wrangle this rhinoceros, not hurt them or not wound them in any way, but simply try to best them to see who's better, the man or the beast, in this situation. And I think it'd be pretty cool. But spoiler alert, it turns out the rhinoceros is actually the noble who's a spellcaster and shapeshifter, and just goes savage.
That is really good. The idea of like a noble who like just loves the sport so much that they drink like a polymorph potion and then kind of throw themselves into it. That's right. No, that wasn't. Yeah, I was thinking in terms of like just I was going more the kind of like the players needed to, before they could even have the kind of like the Matador style like rhino thing, they would have to somehow like capture like a rhino in some way. But then I was thinking more in terms of like what, like working with like, I think you always see rhinos in like those kind of like was it like mud baths almost? Or am I thinking of like hippos?
I think maybe it's more hippos, but I'm sure rhinoceroses like to engage in a mud bath. Yeah,
but it's like it's that kind of like terrain where like it's a pain in the ass to kind of get through, and two, you never know really how deep it goes. And the idea that you can have like like a submerged rhinoceros that kind of pokes up. But no, I must admit, no, I love your idea so much more. The idea of like a noble turning themselves into a rhinoceros and performing, in like. Geez. Wow. It makes you kind of think of like, it almost feels like very humane, because it's the fact that all these events, there's not animals, being like mistreated. It's people willingly turning themselves into animals to kind of enact these events.
Especially if there's very privileged, very prim and proper, getting to let go and be more, brutal or a beast, it'd be really, I'm sure, fun for them and all that. But that was cool. That was
that's a cool little like whole. We're building up so much lore about this weird noble and the kind of like eccentric,
right? Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, geez. No, awesome. Well, hot damn. That worked out better than intended. So what I was going to say, like DeAngelo, kind of before kind of leaving and kind of wrapping up, one of the questions I always kind of like ask people is generally like, seeing as you're quite kind of engaged in kind of before previously the kind of like Comic-Con and kind of convention community, and now that you kind of like are working your way and kind of stepping into like the tabletop RPG community, who would you say are like I guess some of the people within either community that are like points of inspiration for you?
So for me, in the tabletop RPG industry, who inspire me greatly would be that bronze girl, Jasmine Bueller. She's like one of the best creators that I always follow and listen to. Other than that, Gabe Hicks is like really, really talented as a game designer. Also a super cool person. I've actually met both of them last year at PAX Unplugged, and super pleasant people, awesome, like good vibes. Also Tiny DePass. And then there's quite a few people. It's just pretty much anyone who fights for more inclusion and diversity in a real way, because you'll meet those people that are like, I fight for diversity and inclusion, but like it's only a Twitter post, but they actually bring people into their projects, or like pay them money to help them out in their own projects, or like whatever, and you see their real impact and change. And that inspired me greatly, because I got to watch their sessions and see like, all right, how do you handle diversity and inclusion, and also how do you handle like how do you combat people who are aggressively against you, just being like, you're trash and you're ruining the community. Like, how do you handle that in a graceful way? Or do you take your sword out and slay them, and like, what, how do you handle that? And especially with me, who had a lot of social anxiety and am a recovering people pleaser, seeing someone come at other people online is something that I could never think of doing in a million years. So they're a source of inspiration for me on how they handle that with grace and tact. Yeah.
I think as well, in terms of like, I know from following them as well, a lot of them are very much like high tides rise all ships kind of thing. They're very much like with their kind of, they're very much bringing up, those around them with them. And sometimes there are just people who just, again, who needs to be, if they're being a douche, they need to be called a douche.
Yeah, like, exactly.
No, awesome. And then I guess, beyond kind of like Emerald Templars and stuff like that, are there any other kind of like exciting projects for you kind of on the horizon?
That's a major one that I'm working on currently. I think the other thing I would say is giving a shout out to Wounded Warrior Project, because they are a company over here in Arizona, or not Arizona, but like in the United States of America, that help veterans in different ways, and how I work with them is that they actually have a project called Project Odyssey, where they take these soldiers who experience like PTSD and trauma throughout their service, and they help them by reintroducing their trauma in small, controlled ways through tabletop role-playing games. And I'm a part of that. I'm the dungeon master for that. So I've seen like real change happen before my eyes with different veterans, whether it be a situation where they meet other members of their community, like their peers, and they've forged like actual friendships, or they actually have personal growth as they came into the session scared and vulnerable, and then over the sessions and campaign, they grew to heal some sort of wound, whether it be even in just a small, slightest way, and knowing that I could be a part of that, and that they're actually willing to take a chance. Because a lot of times when you think of like therapy, you don't think of tabletop role-playing games, we who have experienced tabletop role-playing games, we know that it's such a source of like healing and food for the soul, as you get to sit around a table with your friends and escape from your life for a second to wield power that you only wish you could have in real life, and be able to do real good and help out. It's a very powerful feeling, and I'm glad they're able to take this game and do real like good with it. Essentially.
Again, you kind of hear about it popping up every now and then about like the therapeutic benefits of just RPGs in general, that kind of like low risk environments, and particularly in the case you kind of think that kind of bring people together who are otherwise would feel isolated or unable to kind of thing. It gives it that kind of that accessibility, and that's an absolutely tremendous course. And I guess again, hearing the kind of the help that you can kind of do with them, it's got to be really kind of fulfilling and give you that kind of warm feeling.
It is. It's funny that because they all come from different backgrounds, so I'm like, all right, guys, there's a locked door in front of you. How are you going to handle it? We're like, all right, we're going to breach it by doing this. You're going to go there. And they're like, actually, it was real. I was like, oh, I'm not prepared for this. Like Jesus. And then the other one was how efficient some people can be because they're from their military experience, where I'll be like, there's a woman on the road who has a side quest for you, and they're like, we're not going to deal with side quests, we're going to go to the main storyline. I'm like, oh, all right, well, let's not get distracted.
All this work I've been working on for one side.
Exactly. So they had to explain, they kind of had to explain like, well, if you only do the main storyline, the session's going to end by session 3, this campaign's going to end by session 3, so you kind of want to explore and do the side quests, and like, we're wasting time here. Every day things could get worse for like, and I was like, oh, that's a good point, but still, like, like, everything's gonna be fine.
I think like just more like a general like DM tip and stuff like that. When you hear your players go, oh, I'm really worried about X, and even though if you've never thought about X, you're just going like, interesting, you really should be worried about X,
right? Exactly. Like that's right, you should totally. Yeah.
Well, no, honestly, DeAngelo, looking at the time, we've done it. We've survived an hour. I can't thank you enough for taking some time and after it's been incredible. I feel like I've learned so much.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, it went by so fast. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, but obviously, kind of like before leaving, just for people as well. What are some of the best places where they can stay up to date with all your work, and obviously hear about when Emerald Templars goes live on Kickstarter next month?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on all social medias at @_DeAngelo. And I update everything about Emerald Templars. Like, I retweet it from there, but there are the Emerald Templar social medias as well. I think on Twitter it's ET_TTRPG. And then also on Twitter, I think it's just Emerald Templars. So you could just search it, or even find my bio and I have it linked to there. And yeah, I'll be giving a lot of information. Right now I started rolling out on who our writer team is, and then I always put out new artwork for what's going to be included in the book and the game and concepts and all that. So it's a lot of fun. So definitely check it out if you like have heard this and feel like it's for you and you think you'll enjoy it. And
yeah, and like I said, again, there's always will be, regardless of where you're listening to it, there'll be a collection of links in the description and stuff like that, where you can obviously stay up to date with everything. But yeah, other than that, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. And I get to ask my favorite question about podcasting, which is I don't actually have a way to end this podcast. So how would you end a podcast, DeAngelo?
It would pretty much be may all your rolls be natural 20s, and may your enemies have natural ones. So
nice. I had such a positive outlook as a fan. Yeah, thank you very much. Nice. Well,